Right, we're back for Revenue Search 8, I believe, with Metanova and Michaela. How's it going, Michaela?
Hi. Great. How are you?
Great. Thanks for being here. Metanova's been one of my favourite subnets for a long time now, and yes, I have bought it all the way up and I've held it all the way down. So I'm a true believer. So
Good. I'm happy to hear
yeah,
that.
because subnets are more than just the price. So, do you want to crack off, Mark? Crack off or begin?
I think we'll just get started, shall we?
Yeah.
Hey, I really liked your tweet yesterday about vision being more important than revenue right now with subnets, and I took it as the warning, the thinly veiled warning that it clearly was, knowing that you're on revenue search today, and you were like, "Listen, guys, it's all about the vision of the big picture, not so much about revenue today." But we're not really in it. Like I did post a response yesterday to your tweet, agreeing with it, and of course, we're all about understanding the big picture for subnets, where they're going. That's the thing we're most interested in. What does the market look like? Has the team got the ability to execute on that ambition and those dreams? And then the least important thing to us, ironically, given the nature of the title of this live stream, is actually how much revenue is coming in now. We are interested in how much revenue is coming in one day, and we'll get to that. But yeah, the most important thing for us is the vision. It is what is the subnet trying to achieve. So that is where we kick off. So tell us about Metanova. Tell us what it is that you do in language that non-techies can understand, like me.
Yes. No, and I think part of the reason why I'm pointing to the vision is because I think the assessment of revenue potential needs to be tailored to what that vision is. And I think there's been this like one size fits all, or there's just been a lack of nuance in the way that we talk about which are the subnets with the greatest opportunity. And I wanted to introduce like a framework that I think is more adaptable to people's specific use cases. In our case, we are the first decentralized drug screening platform. And what that means is that we're using Bittensor to identify molecules that are promising drug candidates. So in the drug development process, it's really, really important to shortlist molecules accurately or to your best of your abilities, like as efficiently as possible, so that you don't waste a bunch of time and resources getting things tested only to find out that they're not going to be a safe and effective drug. It's a very complex system, right? So there's a lot of variables in play. There's a lot of different properties that make a molecule a promising compound or not. So it takes a lot of data and a lot of diverse data sets. And that is very computationally intensive, which is why it's the perfect kind of problem to tackle with a decentralized AI network. We kicked off by providing our miners with 1 billion options of synthesizable molecules and are asking them to select which ones will bind the best to specific targets. We have a rotating set of targets. We will be scaling to different properties beyond activity over time in an effort as well to become more and more efficient about how we select a molecule from this virtual screening platform before we go into the real world and get it synthesized and tested. The other thing that AI can allow you to do, which is super important in this field, is find entirely new entry points. And that novelty really pays off in being able to find a treatment for something that doesn't currently have like a standard of care, and also to really increase the odds of it being patentable. Because in the absence of having like an AI platform to select molecules, traditionally what you do is you start off with something that you know does X. So let's say I know that Zoloft is used as an antidepressant. I want to develop a next generation antidepressant because we're unsatisfied with, the side effects it has or something like that. And the traditional approach takes that existing compound and then tweaks a couple molecules and tests it over time. It's a lot of A/B testing. A/B testing is not necessarily the most efficient way, and it doesn't necessarily get you to an entirely new answer, right? But you need to be able to process large amounts of data in order to identify a completely new solution. So that's what we're trying to do, is really increase the efficiency of this process and opportunities for like novel entry
And you can
points, if that
simulate
makes sense.
this split testing instead of doing it on actual dogs or monkeys.
So right now we are using this open source, well, or fine-tuned version of this open source model that predicts how a molecule will bind to any kind of mammalian protein target. We have the interest of adding other properties as well, which is why we were super excited and think that we're like uniquely positioned to capitalize on the subnet of subnets architecture that will be deployed.
Yes.
Because, for example, it's all great if that can target serotonin, but if it actually can't cross the blood-brain barrier, then it's not going to work. And this gives you a little bit of a sense of like there's a lot of variables at play, and this is the reason why you see on average like a 10% success rate with drug development pipelines, and that's what we're trying to break out of. We want to bring down the cost, we want to make it a lot faster, and in order to do that, we want to be able to like select them well as quickly as possible.
Okay, I need to go back probably 30 seconds. I'm reading from a part of a previous tweet you did a couple of days ago. So you said you got 4.6 million molecule submissions against 7,000 protein targets, and I guess that's the mammalian protein targets you mentioned, from a 1 billion plus compound library in just 4 months. Okay, those 4 sentences, can we just treat me like an idiot?
Yeah, let's break it down.
4.6 molecule
Let's break it down.
submissions. Okay.
Yes. So those are all the molecules that our miners have identified, are both activating the target that we give them and not activating a series of anti-targets. So that's why the number is pretty high, like the 7,000 thing. Because what we're doing is we're using the off targets as like a proxy essentially for like toxicity or selectivity. Because the more targets that a molecule is activating, the more likely it is for it to like induce undesired effects as well. There's just more variables at play. So at this stage, what we're doing is trying to identify things that bind to what we want and don't bind to others.
So there's 7,000 targets that you think are good potential bindings.
So we've been increasing the number. Our challenges have been getting harder and harder over time. Every week we have our target of the week, and that's been curated based on our own R&D interests, which is on behavioral drugs. Right now, we've been selecting targets that are associated with reward and learning mechanisms. So, for example, serotonin, dopamine, noradrenaline, VMAT. A lot of the pharmaceutical development process is based on target selection. So you pick a target that, based on like research, can be potentially helpful for a certain like therapeutic area. So we know that this can be helpful for depression or anxiety, PTSD, chronic pain, whatever. And really, I think one thing that I wanted to talk about today or remind people, we're in a little bit of a different position in that it's this co-creative process. You need to have an adaptive framework for responding to the data that you receive over time, right? Like we can do our best to predict what we're doing in silico, but once we get lab results, we will need to have a flexible framework to capitalize on the opportunities that we get. We'll have a lot of incoming data, and it's like, well, actually, this responded in this way once we were like testing it on rodents, and then you make decisions based on that. So you want to maintain certain optionality when you are crafting like a go-to market strategy. You want to have a focus and a holy grail that is tractable and like has the potential of reaching, a broad market and paying off for all these efforts. But you also need to have the flexibility to make the best of the information that comes available over that development process.
Okay. And so you said 10% of drug discovery is successful. Over what time period? Is that like 15 years?
Like a decade. Like these are all averages, right? This varies quite a bit, but on average, it's costing $2.6 billion, 10 years with a 10% success rate. And also what we're seeing is that the drugs that are getting approved are recycling 90% of the structure of a previous drug. So to my point, there's like been this incremental innovation because you're incentivized to just iterate on what we already know. people think that this is like a very risk on industry. It is not. It's been very conservative because it needs to be. And I think it can be a lot bolder if you are able to like really advance the technology.
So
And I think it has a huge payout as well.
so novel drug discovery is actually relatively rare then, if they're just
Yes.
constantly iterating from previous stuff. So okay, let's say you're a massive big pharma company and you're targeting a niche, I don't know, skin or behavioral drugs, etc. And I take it they're going to be scattergunning approach. So they'll be in parallel testing a whole bunch of different drugs, knowing that only 10% of them will work. Is that what they do?
You're picking a number of compounds to test at once, right? And so that's why people use this metaphor of it being like a funnel, right? Because you're basically going through the process of elimination of that didn't work, that didn't make it through this trial, that didn't make it through that trial, and hopefully you're left with one. But we're trying to optimize the very top of the funnel, and calling it, we're
Got
narrowing
it.
the top of the funnel so
Okay.
that it becomes actually more of like a cylinder. And greater and greater confidence that what you're selecting from the very beginning will make it all the way through.
Okay, so I thought there was going to be one bottleneck, because one of the questions I was going to ask is drug discovery the bottleneck or the FDA? But it sounds like possibly both.
Maybe all of the above,
Yeah,
yes. There's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of challenges, but I think that also acts as a moat and is the reason why it has such an asymmetrical return. Like, there's a reason why you can land like, deals that are in the hundreds of millions, if not billions, for one asset, because it is so hard to get there. It's very well rewarded. What we think is possible is to really increase the odds of getting there.
got it. And I've got one last question in this thread of questions. So I think this then addresses the big elephant in the room, and a lot of people that I talk to about Metanova, it always comes to Big Pharma is just going to kill her, or they're just going to buy them out and shelve their stuff, or they're just Big Pharma. Everyone's scared of Big Pharma. So, but based on everything you've just said, you're going to be Big Pharma's best friend, surely, because you're going to save
Can
them a
be.
shit ton of money.
I can be, but like I also think it's like I'm willing to be Big Pharma's best friend if they can help us like advance technology that can change people's lives, right? Like,
Boom.
let's not.
My,
I think they've been they've been operating under the wrong incentives, and I think we can create a platform. We launched this platform to support our own R&D, and that is still like our primary focus is to make drugs ourselves. But we also are doing this in a way where anybody can use our services to advance their own drug interests. So, like I was saying, we're very interested in what, broadly is, cross therapeutic behavioral drugs, because we think that those are the starting points of like health, wellness, and like longevity. Like, if you think about the best science-backed longevity interventions, they're lifestyle interventions like caloric restriction. So if you can develop drugs that help people like regulate key behavioral states and mental states, you will see that they're associated with a number of different conditions. And I think that's why semaglutides are doing so well right now, like Ozempic, Mounjaro, because in helping people like regulate their eating, their insulin, all of this, it has cascading effects on a number of diseases. But if somebody wants to come in and develop a drug for Parkinson's or cancer, our platform allows us to do that. We are truly target agnostic. That's why we're
yeah.
running predictions across all of these different targets.
And why behavioral drugs then? So if you're completely agnostic, why are you doubling down or focusing on behavioral drugs to begin
That's
with?
our R&D thesis. I think that we will see that this becomes more and more of a trend in terms of how you select targets. I think we saw, like I said, with the semaglutides, like the power of regulating satiety mechanisms, and I think reward and learning mechanisms just have every upside available. Like, you can feel better today, and you can live a healthier life. That's probably going to make it less likely for you to like develop a certain kind of disease and potentially even like live longer. right? It also, from like a business perspective, gives you maximum optionality to respond, as I was saying, to the data that becomes available when you're like getting lab results, because you're going upstream from just, I got a heart attack, right? Like, let's not wait for you to get diabetes. Let's think about what are the issues, what are the interventions that we can have today for you to actually live a long and happy, healthy life.
Okay, Big Pharma's not going to like you. You're taking away money from them. Unhealthy people is their business model.
Well, actually, I would say Big Pharma could potentially love me, because what you're seeing, for example, with semaglutides, is that people are willing to pay out of pocket.
Okay.
And the total addressable market becomes like the entire population, not like virtually, as in when you think about just developing a drug for like a specific condition, then there's a population associated with that, right? But when you're talking about like foundational behaviors that are linked to a variety of diseases and
Yeah.
conditions, then the total addressable market is significantly larger. That's why people have been referring to these drugs as population scale drugs.
Nice. And okay, so we don't have much documentation on subnets within subnets, but I guess if do you think we'll have 256 miners per subnet? And if so, does that mean each subnet could be a drug, like a completely different drug area, if that makes sense?
Right. So we haven't settled on how we want to design the subnet of subnets. And to be fair, there's a lot of speculation, and we'll have to be
Yeah.
responsive to how this is like led by the Open Tensor Foundation and what parameters and flexibility they allow us to operate with. And we're happy to have a conversation with them about what suits our needs the best. Um, for us, I think tentatively, it's about this like multi-parametric optimization of like, okay, I have a molecule and I want to make sure that it reaches the brain, that it activates the right target, that it's like soluble enough, that it doesn't like pose any risk on your like liver and kidney. Like there's a lot of different things that we can try to run predictions on. And so our shortlisting efforts will be a lot more efficient if we can find something that checks all the boxes early stage. And there's they call these medicinal chemistry filters. There's a ton of them to go through. We just started with activity because that seemed like the best starting point, and in fact, it's maybe like the highest leverage thing to do. But even within like activity predictions, you have different tools, different ways to run those predictions. We can also expand upon that. We're seeing this explosion in models being released, and we have created something that allows us to plug them in rather easily. We're interested in improving these open source models as well, because what we realized upon launch is that the adversarial environment incentivizes miners to break our models, essentially, to win the challenge, right? And so what they're doing is they're doing something that people that are working inside of a company or working inside of a university don't do, because they're trying to publish nice results. They're trying to confirm that they are right about their hypothesis, whereas our miners just want to earn those token rewards. And in doing so, they are poking holes at these models at lightning speed. And
Right.
that's giving us really, really valuable data that we can use to retrain models and create things that are like a lot more reliable in their predictions.
Well, I thought I understood this. Honestly, we've talked before. I thought you were just helping pharma to get to where they wanted to get to a bit quicker and a bit more cheaply than they really are, and that your customer, your natural customer, was going to be pharma. But now I think I understand it rather differently. So let me just
Well, they can be. So I think what's important for us is we've charted a strategy that allows us to get independently all the way to consumer if we want. But what you also need to realize is like in the process of doing that, you can monetize every step. And with the data that becomes available, it validates everything that you've produced to date, making it more and more attractive to biotech companies and pharmaceutical companies to also use our platform for their own work. So we can offer screening as a service, we can offer model training as a service, We can license libraries of compounds based on in silico predictions. And eventually, we can also license specific assets that we are developing at any stage. These are open conversations. In fact, I think we were surprised for people to reach out to us at such an early stage. I don't, a lot of these things, I need to be tactful and like about how much detail I provide on these conversations, but I can tell you it's been very encouraging to have outside people demonstrate interest in the platform that we're building and seeing how it can be helpful to them as well.
Cool. So let me go right back to the beginning then and just check that the way that I'm thinking this through is correct. So the way that pharma does it is it understands like what happens. So thing A and thing B, when they interact, this is what happens. But then now we know what happens when these two things interact. We need to look at these thing C, and so anything could happen.
Yeah.
So because things are so unlikely, they really focus on known knowns. So they know what these two things do. So then they don't go very far away from those things because the cost of testing is so huge. And what you end up with there is you end up with drug research that is focused around areas where there's already been significant research. So drug discovery is limited to like one step away from drugs that have already been discovered. And what?
Yes, with the exception of centralized AI drug discovery companies that are doing what we are doing, but in a centralized way.
Okay.
And then the difference there being that they've had to raise, hundreds of millions of dollars in order to be able to access, the talent and compute that we are getting essentially.
So the way that you're doing it is you don't need to start off with the known knowns. You could start off anywhere you like. Like, let's see what these two things do, and let's see how they interact with this thing. So your sphere of experimentation is way broader than what pharma would be reasonably.
Non-AI companies,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. So
and non-AI companies, yes. And for AI companies, we just have a huge advantage in like our capital efficiency of running these predictions and the incentive to be more collaborative because we don't need to be siloing our data and our models in the same way because our valuation doesn't depend on that level of secrecy.
Okay.
Love it.
And the traditional way of doing this is you spend billions of dollars on it. It takes a long time. You end up with 90% of what you've discovered is just a reiteration of what you already knew, and there's only a 10% success rate. And it's not really novel drug discovery because it's so close to what was already known. And you're kind of blowing that apart by going like, we can look at anything, we can look at it as broadly as we like. Your chances of finding something that's properly novel and properly going to benefit humanity is way greater than the chances of traditional pharma doing it in their traditional laboratories.
Yes, the non-AI companies, yes. And that's why AI was supposed to change this, right? It was supposed to provide like an opportunity for, say, somebody with a rare disease, small population, therefore no economic incentive to really be spending billions of dollars to develop a drug for them. They all of a sudden might be able to benefit from this kind of approach. But as I was saying, the reason why we haven't seen AI make a huge difference in the drug development pipeline is because it's so capital intensive and because they don't have the right incentives in order to like process the amount of data that you need in order to find greater accuracy in these predictions. It's an incentive issue, really. That's why we really think that we're uniquely positioned to benefit from decentralization. Like it's not a compromise. That's what I was referencing in my post yesterday. It's actually like a huge edge.
Yeah.
And you're compressing stuff by decades. Literally.
I can't ascertain how long it's going to take at this point. But I have every reason to believe that we will be faster and more efficient.
And you can sell stuff and license stuff to the pharma companies, but you're also kind of reserving the right to go direct and sell something where your total addressable market might be all of humanity that's willing to pay for it.
Well, that's a big statement, but
Okay.
anyway, I just think you're seeing, I think there's something to be said about medications that people are choosing to pay out of pocket, maybe even self-prescribe. I think what you're
Yes.
seeing there is it's hard to live in this day, and you need to get a control over your behaviors. And it's like, on the one hand, you have drug development, which has been lagging, and often like a lot of the drugs that are getting approved still have like pretty like horrible side effects, and people are not incentivized to take them to like treat themselves, especially in the psychiatric section. And then on the other hand, you have people that are like self-prescribing certain drugs. And what I think is really important is to use them as tools that break out of negative patterns so that you can regulate yourself, so you can establish a healthy lifestyle. It's not about, getting people addicted on anything, but it's recognizing the fact that there is a huge gap here. And that's why people are reaching for things, because they're trying to medicate themselves and improve their overall like life experience.
Well, listen, I think we've nailed big picture.
Okay. Yeah, of 15 minutes, we're 13 minutes through now, so we've got to do the last 2 minutes. Wet labs. When are you starting wet lab?
It's in the next couple of months. We have pre-existing relationships with globally recognized labs. Thanks to Pedro's been in the industry and has some really good relationships. That really helps us. There was a lag in just the traditional side of things. But what's really interesting about that is that, okay, maybe pharma is like, crypto what? Like, you're doing what on crypto? Like, we don't want to have anything to do with it. However, they care about data. And they will respect data that's coming from labs that they also use. That's like a third party, just like referee source of truth, right? Exactly. It's finding these points of overlap to convince them of the value and of what we're building. So that's why I think over time, the more validation that we get, especially with like third parties that are commonly used, the more they will catch on to what we're building.
Amazing. Right, Mark, do you want to do the revenue questions?
Well, they are not as straightforward as I thought, but
no, they're not.
Okay, so your operation at the moment, have you got plenty of runway? Is this sustainable? Are you going to be able to sustain Metanova through to the point where you got money flooding in?
Yeah. Definitely.
Okay, good. I like the sound of that. And then when do you think, like, what's your best guess here? What's your stretch guess? When do you think that revenue is going to start to flow in, fiat revenue?
In the order of months.
In an order of months.
It's just the numbers that I think are the most exciting take longer.
Okay, so i.e. the bigger numbers are going to take longer.
The bigger numbers take longer. The smaller numbers happen faster.
Yeah.
So where is that coming from? The smaller numbers?
The smaller numbers from services.
Like, okay.
Okay, so selling services into the existing industry.
Yes, which we already have a conversation around that.
Yeah.
And for the viewers, if you're thinking, wait a minute, Siam and Mark are being pretty gentle here on the revenue questions, the reason being is that Michaela is bound by certain things that she can and can't say. So that's why we're not pushing as hard on the revenue type questions.
Yeah, but I think she's told us all we need to know, which is that revenue is going to start to flow in the next few months, and that's really, really important for a few reasons. It validates what's happening, and it creates significant sustainability. One of the things that we look for in a subnet is whether they're going to be able to get to the point where the big money actually comes in, or whether they're going to run out of train track before then. And it sounds like you guys have got a very, very sustainable plan. You're going to be able to get comfortably to where you need to get to, where the revenue starts to flow. And then that gives you a kind of a shot at getting the big money in.
If I can add anything, I think what's misleading is that we already have a token. So people think that we IPO'd, right? And it's like, no, this is a launch pad to start a project, start a company. But there feels like this cognitive dissonance of like, usually if you're in the biotech sector, like you don't have a stock, or and you don't have something that's publicly traded until you're further along in this process. So really you're being invited into the very beginning of the first decentralized screening platform. And the way that people assess biotech markets is based on milestones. And that's why really the thing to look for in our case is the results. So are we delivering based on quantity and quality? And right now, that's why, we were publishing the numbers. Like, it's really amazing that in only 4 months, we've got 4.8 molecules identified by miners. How many gems are there? I'm not sure. I will be able to tell you with more and more levels of certainty the more testing is done in the real world, right? And then in terms of quality, we've seen a huge increase in the unique molecules that are being submitted. So that is basically like a proxy for the diversity and a proxy for us to measure how much of the data set the miners are exploring. So how novel are these compounds as well? The other things that we were encouraged by is that we're also seeing molecules that are analogs or very similar to approved drugs. And these are the signals that we get. I know people want us to be more, I also want to be accurate, and I don't want to just like fall into like a hype machine. And these things take maybe a little bit longer than just like plugging in a computer and running a problem. We're working with like real world problems. I think they are worthy and they will pay out over time. We're maintaining like an adaptive framework that will allow us to navigate a number of conditions. And what we're also seeing is that I think we're just in time for the return of platform premiums and valuations in the sector, which is very exciting for us because the horrible, dismal numbers and success rate and timeline and costs are the reason why a lot of companies downscaled their bets to just one asset. But then it's a binary outcome of that asset either makes it or doesn't. What the platform allows you to do is create a machine of assets that just spits them out over time.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think we're going to have to call it there.
Well, no, I want to ask the finishing question, because I know we've got hundreds of people watching who are alpha holders. Have you got any plans like set in stone, or we've had conversations about this, to support the alpha token with revenue as it starts to flow in?
Yes. And I think the best way for us to talk about it is our goal is to get to a crypto native environment where our token is used to access the assets and to hire our services. However, we are creating a new model and we don't want to add any friction. Like, I don't want there to not be a deal with a company that isn't ready to buy Tau and swap it into Nova. So we will have to steward that transition and let it flow into the alpha over time.
Yeah. Well, we had John on from Shoots a few days ago, and yeah, they're selling their services in fiat, and then it's in Shoots' remit really to they're moving it from fiat into Tau, and then from Tau into alpha.
Yeah.
I understand that when you go out into the real world, it's fiat that most of those companies are going to want to give you.
It's fiat, but I hope to be part of the movement that brings them entirely on chain, and we're not on fiat. It's going to take time, but that's the goal. The goal is to make Nova that gateway.
Well, that is a worthy goal, and
this is so cool.
Solid note to finish on.
Michaela, thank you again. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for letting me yap at you for 38 minutes.
No, this is good.
15 minutes.
Yeah, this has been a really good 15 minutes. And as soon as the recording's done, I'm going to be, I think Chamath Palihapitiya is going to be all over this, because his wife has a drug company as well. So I'm just going to ping it over to
Fantastic. When are we back, Siam?
Today.
What?
In a few hours, yeah. 1400 local. We're here with James from Synth. And then next week, we've only got 2 next week.
So far,
yeah.
But if you want to get involved, send us an email, siam@mark@dsvfund.com. Reach out.
Email Mark. I don't look at my emails. So.
That's probably best. Mark@dsvfund.com. Email me. We'll get you slotted in for next week. yeah, we've got a few days free there. But we're back with James 2 o'clock today.
Yep. So I'll see you all in a bit. And
Fantastic.
again, Michaela, cheers.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you. Bye.
See ya. And